comments to our discussion for today, we would like to introduce ourselves first. So, I am Sheila Visitasyon Balingasa.
I'm Mary Rose Tabayag Parido.
I'm Mary Toledo.
I'm Elizabeth Barcelona.
I am Melandre dos Santos.
And we are the Group 3. So, before we proceed to our discussion, I'll give you a brief introduction about our topic. So, the learners who are gifted and talented has also a special needs. It is not only to those learners who has a learning disabilities or learning disorder, but also to those gifted and talented. So, if that special needs did not met, it may lead to a deleterious consequences. Hence, in order to maximize their learning, it is necessary to recognize or to determine those learners who is gifted and talented. Therefore, this chapter that we are going to discuss to you will introduce the concept of the giftedness and the various meaning being attached to it, and me and my co-members will discuss to you the different characteristics and the purpose of the learnings and also the way to identify them are presented. So, let's start. Chapter 3, the types, characteristics, and the identification of gifted and talented learners. So, our intended learning outcomes, or the ILO, so at the end of the discussion, we are able to identify the gifted and talented learners. So first, let's discuss the definition of giftedness. According to Davis, Grimm, and Siegel 2014, the terms gifted and talented convey different meanings to different people. So, according to them, yung term na gifted and talented, naghahatid siya ng ibang kahulugan sa ibang tao. Indeed, even among experts, the use of this term is ambiguous and inconsistent. When we say ambiguous, hindi siya sigurado. And then when we say inconsistent, hindi pare-pareho. And there is not one uniform definition that is universally accepted. Nevertheless, it is considered acceptable to use this term interchangeable. So according to them, it was good to use these terms interchangeable. When we say interchangeable, nagpapalit-palit siya. So for us, when we say gifted learners or talented learners, it is pertaining to what? It is pertaining to the same person. So for example, let's say si Mr. Baita. So he was good in dancing. So he is gifted as well as talented. Like what I had said earlier, that when we say gifted and talented, it is pertaining to the same person. For uniformity and terminology, in this chapter, we will refer to the characteristic as giftedness. So according to Davis et al. 2014 and Stankowski 1978, the diverse definitions given to giftedness can be placed under 5 categories. So, what are they? Number 1 are the after the fact definition. Number 2 is the IQ definition. Number 3 is the percentage definitions. Number 4 is the talent definitions. And lastly, number 5, the creativity definitions. First, let's talk about the after the fact definition. So what is after the fact definition? So according, or as you can see the PPT, after the fact definition are those consistently perform outstandingly and achieve a valuable are considered gifted or talented. So my example here, imagine that your teacher gave you an activity in which you are going to perform a demonstrative speech what you are going to do is you are going to teach your classmate in a particular things. You are going to demonstrate that how the cigarettes affect the human body. So after that, you perform well and you explain what are the effect of the cigarette and the human body. And then you amaze your teacher as well as your classmate. So it means that you perform outstandingly. So that is an example of the after the fact definition. The next category was the IQ definition. So what is IQ definition? So as you can see at the PowerPoint presentation, IQ definition are those who get a score above a certain cutoff point in an intelligence test are considered gifted or talented. It is one of the most popularly used definition of giftedness despite of the following limitations. So as you can see at the PPT that we prepared, we have here 4 limitations. Number 1, it's focused on intelligence as traditionally defined, ignores creative and artistic gift. So dito sa IQ definition, ini-ignore dito yung creativity ng mga bata or the student and also the artistic gift, yung mga ibang talent nila. Kasi dito sa IQ definition, dito sa pinakaunang limitation, it is more on intelligence. It is focused on the intelligence of the learners. Number 2 limitation, it does not take into account gift in specific areas. Number 3, it discriminates against disadvantaged students. And lastly, number 4 limitation, a student who are just a few points below the cut-off score are automatically considered ungifted. So example is, sa isang exam, 1 to 100 items, then yung passing rate niya is 80 and above. So kapag nakakuha ka ng 80 and below, ibig sabihin, you are automatically ungifted. So that is the IQ definition. Next is, let's talk about the percentage definition. So what is percentage definition? So as you can see at the PowerPoint presentation, percentage definition are those who belong to a fixed proportion that the school or district sets are considered gifted or talented. So example is, a school or district may consider the top 5% of students as gifted. So however, this can be very arbitrary, as schools or the district may set different percentages that they considered gifted or talented. Moreover, it can easily be misunderstood as the school or district having this percentage as considering the gifted and talented. So for instance, 5% of students who are gifted or talented, when this is actually a predetermined percentage set by the school or the district. So that is an example for the percentage definition. Next, the 4th category, which is the talent definition. So talent definition are those who excel in a specific static or academic areas are considered gifted or talented. So dito naman naka self-explanatory na siya kasi talent definition. So more on talent siya. So dito ito yung mga learners na nag-excel in a specific static or academic. So static is example is arts. You are good in music, you are good in dancing. That is an example of static. While the academics, you are good in mathematics, you are good in English, you are good in science. So it is considered as gifted or talented. And now, let's discuss the last categories of the diverse definition of the giftedness, which is the creativity definition. So what is creativity definition? Creativity definition are those who possess superior creative abilities are considered gifted or talented. However, whether creativity is an acceptable selection criterion for giftedness, it is still debatable. So, for example, a creativity definition is your teacher gave you a project in which you are going to create a spoken poetry, and you are going to take 5 to 10 minutes, for example. Then, as a student, we are often do things to make our project more beautiful, more colorful, more attractive. So, dito, magiging creative na tayo. Pwedeng gumawa tayo ng costume to attract others, not only the teacher but also the other student na makakapanood nung spoken poetry na ginawa mo. Pwedeng gumawa ng sayaw na related doon sa spoken mo, o kaya mag-interpretative, or pwede din kung about culture yung spoken mo, pwedeng yung background mo is naandun ka sa palayan. So, being a student, we are all experiencing this kind of this creativity definition. I know that every one of us are experiencing being creative and making our activities and making our projects. So that is an example of the creativity definition. And now, let's talk about the importance of recognizing gifted learners. So, napaka-importanteng ma-recognize natin yung mga estudyanteng gifted or talented. Kaya nasabi ko kanina, kapag hindi natin nabigyan ng pansin yung mga estudyanteng gifted at talented, it may lead a deleterious consequences. May mga consequences daan. Like this, so according to Baxter, it is important to determine gifted learners as a failure. To do so could have a deleterious consequences to the child's learning. So number one consequences is students might become demotivated to work, which could lead to resistance or working in a sloppy and careless manner. Totoo naman, kapag hindi natin nabigyan ng pansin yung mga estudyanteng gifted at talented, pwedeng maging demotivated sila. Hindi sila maging motivated sa paggawa ng mga activities. Baka isipin nila, hindi naman niya ako pinapansin, kaya hindi ko na yung gagawin. Of course, as a teacher, we need to make a way for that. Next consequences is the frustration may also arise as one may perceive the regular class pace as too slow. Tama naman, may frustration kapag hindi nakuha yung special needs o hindi natin nabigyan pansin yung mga batang gifted at talented. Next consequences is the student may ask embarrassing questions or question why things need to be done in a certain way. Totoo naman kasi yung ibang estudyante, kapag hindi nabibigyan ng pansin, syempre, kapag tinawag mo sila, pwedeng tanungin yung teacher ng embarrassing question. And pwede din magtanong siya ng mga bagay-bagay. Oh, bakit nga naging ganito? Bakit paano nakuha yung X? Paano nakuha yung Y? So, ganun yung mga estudyante, hindi nila nakukuha yung kailangan nila. Kasi, sometimes yung iba, matataas na yung IQ. Kaya ganun, yung parang nag-feeling magaling na kasi sa teacher. Of course, as a student, we must respect our teacher. Kahit gaano ka man katalino, always respect your teacher. Kasi, ikaw, matalino ka nga. Pero, mas lamang sa'yo yung teacher kasi, of course, marami na silang napagdaanan, marami na silang alam, marami na silang experience about some things, in particular things. So, kapag hindi natin nabigyan ng pansin yung mga gifted and talented, pwedeng ito mangyari, yung magtatanong ng embarrassing question yung estudyante, or pwedeng makipag-debate siya dun sa teacher. Next is, a student may become impatient for not being called in class and blurt out answer without raising hands. So, ito naman kapag sa klase, kapag nagtataas ng kamay, for example alam na ngayon ni teacher, magaling yan sumagot, kaya hindi na tinawag, give chance to other. Kaya ang tatawagin yung iba. So, dahil doon, siguro, na-feel nung estudyante na hindi nga ako tinatawag nito. Kaya, dahil doon, sinalita niya yung sagot without raising his or her hands. Kaya, pwedeng maging consequences yon kapag hindi nila nakuha yung special needs na hinihingi nila. Next consequences is, there is also a tendency to become intolerance of one's own or others' imperfections and become overly sensitive to criticism. Kapag may group activity, kapag more on criticizing the others, nagiging sensitive na yung mga gifted or talented learners. Next is, student may act boozy with peers and teachers, refuse to conform, and may rebel against routine and predictability. Tama naman. Next is, student may also have problems with cooperative learning and may refuse to take direction from others. So, tama. Kapag hindi nakuha, sabi ko nga kanina, kapag hindi nakuha yung needs ng mga gifted or learners, ito ang mangyayari. Maaring anong tamang term nito? Yung sarili lang nila yung iniisip nila. Wala silang pakialam sa iba, even the teacher, kahit magbigayan ng instruction, hindi sila nakikinig. Kasi hindi nga nabibigyan toon yung mga gifted and talented, yung mga pangangailangan nila. Next is, the last consequences is there is also a possibility of acting out and monopolizing class discussion, and boredom with the class may lead one to behave as a class clown or to daydream. Na-encounter ko din to during my junior high school. Kasi one of my classmates is a boy. Talagang makulit siya. Well, masasabi kong magaling siya sa academics, but sometimes talagang makulit siya. Parang kulang sa aruga. Ganon. Pero, syempre, siguro dahil hindi siya nabibigyan ng tamang atensyon. So, that's why it is very necessary to recognize or to determine those learners who is gifted and talented. So, that's what be all.
Good day everyone, I am Mary Rose and I will be discussing the characteristics and profile of gifted learners. So in characteristics of gifted learners, Baxter identified three. First, the intellectual, second, the non-intellectual, and third, the personality-wise. So first characteristic is intellectual. So in intellectual, a gifted learner are having exceptional reasoning ability, being curious intellectually, learning quickly, being able to do abstraction, having complex thought processes, and having vivid imagination. So that means a child whose intellectual abilities, creativity, and potential for achievement are so outstanding than the others. Also in intellectual, a gifted learner also shows early moral concerns such as has a passion for learning, has the ability to concentrate, think analytically, creative, has a keen sense of justice, and has a capacity to reflect deeply. So, gifted learners are able to retain great amounts of information for longer period of time. They have a keen sense of observation, cataloging body language, voice inflections, and other details that most don't. Second characteristic is the non-intellectual. So here, a gifted learner may not always follow the rule, tend to be domineering and argumentative, tends to tune out, and is excessively competitive. It is because gifted learners tend to learn via exploration and they don't like going over what they already know. It's not that these learners don't like rote learning. They just don't like it once they've already learned something. That's why they may not always follow the rule. Also, more than the average child, gifted learners recognize earlier on more options for behavior, even those they weren't offered to, and they're willing to exercise those options. It may be to choose one activity over another, to ask for something, or to disagree with you. Also, in non-intellectual, the learners may also have a tendency toward tunnel vision, be excited easily, may have a sharp sense of humor, and usually has a tendency to become a compulsive collector. It is because learners respond to life with greater emotion than the average person. They tend to be very passionate about an area of interest to them and have the ability to sustain that passion for a long period of time. But sometimes their behavior can even seem obsessive-compulsive. Last characteristic is the personality-wise. So in here, a gifted learner is insightful. The learner may have a strong need to understand and to be stimulated mentally. There is also a possibility towards perfectionism, one-way demand for explanations as to why things work that way due to high need for precision and logic. So, gifted learners have the ability to understand what is perfect in a situation, which can lead to frustration for them if they believe they can't achieve that standard. Since they want to do things well, they may not be willing to attempt certain tasks. They are insatiable also. They tend to have an insatiable curiosity and appetite for learning. They're fascinated with books and ask many questions, often more than a parent can answer, because they can see beyond the moment, recognize patterns, and have the ability to abstract and solve problems. Also, in this characteristic, giftedness may also entail having excellent sense of humor as well as sensitivity towards others. because they're able to perceive authenticity in people and as a result often have a great sense of humor early on. They tend to demonstrate a sense of fairness and need for justice born out of a sense of compassion for others. They are more emotionally sensitive than the average child, first about themselves and then others. Also, they can be very compassionate with a moral sensitivity about them. Also, in this characteristic, a gifted learner may as well show intensity, perseverance, and have an acute self-awareness. Furthermore, the learner may exhibit nonconformity, tendency to question rules or authority, and become an introvert. Because when it comes to pursuing their passions, gifted learners stick to it. They demonstrate a sustained passion to figure out something and to learn all of it as far as they can in their area of interest. That is the reason why sometimes the gifted learners become an introvert. Next are the profiles of gifted learners. So, in the profiles of gifted learners, Betts and Neyhart of 2004 and 2017 did a profiling and they were able to arrive at 6 types. The successful, the creative, the underground, the at-risk, twice exemptional, and the autonomous learner. First is the successful type. So in this type of learner, sila po yung tinatawag na convergent thinker. That is why they learn easily and excels in exam. Also, because they possess a positive self-concept, they are liked by the people around them, but they are unaware of deficiencies. Second is the creative type. So sila po yung tinatawag na divergently gifted. Pero ang problema po sa kanila, kapag yung learners hindi po na-meet yung needs nila, they are often unidentified and they question authority. And also, if they receive little recognition for accomplishments, they struggle with self-esteem. That is why they are at risk as eventual dropout from their school. Third is the underground type. So dahil sa social pressure na nararanasan ng learner, they want to be included in non-gifted peer group. This will lead to a sudden decline in their grades. So kapag nagbaba yung grades ng learner na yon, makaka-experience sila ng conflict with expectations sa teachers and sa parents nila. Fourth type is the at-risk. So dito, yung learners hindi pa po nila nami-meet yung needs nila. Kaya naman, they tend to be angry with adults and with themselves. Also, they are depressed because they have poor self-concept, and also their interests are outside realm of regular school curriculum. Fifth type is the twice exemptional. So dito po, sila po yung may physical and emotional challenges. Also, typically po, hindi po siya ina-identified as gifted because sila po yung learners na may learning disabilities. Kaya naman po yung iba sa kanila, they are limited in English proficiency. Last type is the autonomous learners. So dito, they work effectively in school system. And that system, they use it to create new opportunities. These learners have a positive concept, a positive self-concept. That is why they get positive attention and support for their accomplishments. Also, these learners are respected by adults and peers. They are independent, and they stand up for convictions. That's all. Thank you.
Typical and atypical development. Knowledge of typical and atypical development can be useful for teachers and parents in identifying learners with giftedness and talents as well as disabilities. Development milestones for typical development provide a very useful anchor to which teachers and parents can compare a child's development with. So, what is typical development? Typical development is when a children tend to acquire these skills in an orderly fashion and within certain age brackets. This pattern of skill acquisition is often referred to as normal or typical development and is used to monitor a child's developmental progress. Example of typical development is smiling, crawling, manipulating objects, walking, self-care, and talking are examples of developmental milestones that provide valuable insight into a child's development. Most children develop skills in similar patterns and at similar times. In the table, the typical development milestones of a 1-year-old baby shows the cognitive. A 1-year-old baby tends to follow moving objects with eyes. Usually po yung mga colorful na things, sinusundan nila ng tingin. Next is recognizes difference among people. Kapag hindi nila kilala yung isang tao, hindi po sila doon malapit or kaya naman ay umiiyak sila. Responds to and imitates facial expressions of others. Sa mga ganitong age bracket, usually ginagaya ng mga bata yung mga nakikita nila expressions. Halimbawa, pinapangiti mo sila or beautiful eyes, close opens. Yun po talaga kadalasan yung age bracket kung saan nagagawa nila to. Responds to various simple directions. Katulad na lang nung responds to and imitates facial expressions of others, madali rin po silang pasunodin kung ano yung sinasabi natin. Imitates gestures and actions. Puts small objects in and out of container with intention. Next is language. Recognizes names. For example, when they say mommy or mama, alam po nila na yun yung tinatawag. Says 2 to 3 words besides mama and dada. Dito na po nade-develop yung language nga po nila wherein natututo sila ng kahit may ikling words in order to distinguish objects, things, or kahit po tao. Imitates familiar words, understands simple instructions, and recognizes words as symbols for objects. Car points to garage and cat meows. So, kapag nakakarinig po sila ng meow, they already know na pusa iyon. Next is gross motor. They sits without support, crawls, pulls self to standing position and stands unaided, walks with aid, rolls a ball in imitation of adult. For the fine motor, they reaches, grasps, put object in mouth, picks things up with pincer grasp, the thumb and one finger, transfers object from one hand to the other, and drops and picks up toys. For interaction, they smile spontaneously. We really love babies' giggles. They respond differently to strangers than to familiar people. Katulad nga po nung sinabi ko kanina, kapag hindi nila kilala, they tend to cry or hindi sila lumalapit sa taong yun. They pays attention to own name. Alam na po nila na kapag tinawag yung pangalan nila, nagre-respond sila dun sa tumawag sa kanila. They respond to know. Yung kapatid ko po, he's turning to this coming October 28 and alam na po niya kung ano po yung ayaw at gusto niya. And they also copy simple actions of others. Like halimbawa yung gestures na nakikita nila sa ibang tao, ginagaya na po nila. For the adaptive, They feed self cracker, holds cup with two hands, drinks with assistance, and holds out arms and legs while being dressed. Um, yung baby brother ko po, sinasanay na po agad namin siya na kumain mag-isa. Not that kumain mag-isa talaga, kasi binabantayan naman po namin. It is when siya na po yung pinapahawak namin sa mga kutsara, sa plato, at sa pagkain niya po. For between 1 and 2, halos kagaya lang din naman po siya nung kanina, for 1-year-old, they imitate actions and words of adults, understand simple, familiar directions, responds to words or commands with appropriate actions, and they are able to match two similar objects. They look at storybook pictures with an adult, naming or pointing to familiar objects on request. They recognize the difference between you and me and has very limited attention span. They also accomplishes primary learning through own exploration. Dito na sila nag-explore, dito na nag-open yung mind nila to know more about the world. For the language, they understand snow, uses 10 to 20 words including names. Yung kapatid ko po pala, i-share ko lang na he's just 1 and yet alam na niya kung ano yung pangalan niya. Pinapagaya po namin siya on how to say his name. For example, my name is Jude Andre M. De Los Santos, and ginagaya niya po yun, though nabubulol siya kasi 1-year-old pa lang nga, but it's okay, at least po, natututo siya. Combines two words such as daddy, bye-bye, waves goodbye, and plays pata cake. Yung kapatid ko po, hindi po siya nagwe-wave goodbye kasi kapag may nakikita po siyang umaalis, or lalo na po sila mama and papa, or kahit po kami, umiiyak po talaga siya. He didn't do waving. Ayaw niya po ng goodbyes. He makes the sounds of familiar animals, gives a toy when asked, uses words such as more to make wants known. Alam naman po natin, he or she points to his or her toes, eyes, and nose. My baby brother po. Sorry for sharing a lot about my baby brother. Yung mama po ko po kasi is a daycare worker. She's a child development worker, so baby pa lang po kami, tinuturuan na po talaga niya kami. And then yung kapatid ko po na 1-year-old pa lang, he already knows where is his toes, his eyes, his nose. 1 to 2-year-old babies also brings object from another room when asked. Nautusan ko na po pala yung kapatid ko. Halimbawa, ikuha mo ako ng ganito, ikuha mo ako ng ganyan. Hindi niya po talaga yun pinapakuha sa iba. Kasi siya po talaga yung kumukuha. For the motor coordination, in the gross motor, they walks alone. Actually, malayo na nga po yung nararating niya. Walks backwards. At yun po yung kinakatakot namin. Kasi po, sa bahay namin, yung harap po is, yung daanan po ng motor is pataas. Tapos, nag-walk po siya pa backwards. So, natatakot po talaga kami. Pero as long as nasusupervise niya naman po yung baby, ayos lang po yan. They picks up toys from floor without falling. They pulls toys and pushes toys too. They sit in child-sized chair, walks up and down stairs with hand held. They also moves to music. Another trivia for my baby brother, he loves dancing. He really does. For the fine motor, they build tower of 3 small blocks, puts 4 rings on stick, places 5 pegs in pegboard, turns pages 2 or 3 at a time, scribbles, turns knobs, throws small ball, paints with whole arm movement, shift hands and makes strokes. Social interaction. They recognize self in mirror or pictures. Another for my baby brother, kapag nakikita niya po yung sarili niya sa salamin or sa picture, tuwang-tuwa siya. And sa bahay po, may naka-display din na konting pictures namin. Then kapag tinatanong po namin siya na, "Where's mama? Where's papa? Where's ate?" Then yung itinuturo po niya is, imbis na kami, yung pictures lang itinuturo niya. They refers to self by name, place by self, initiates own play, imitates adult behaviors in play, and helps put things away. At ito din po yung isa sa mga nakakatuwang traits ng isang bata is kapag may nakita po silang nagliligpit, tumutulong po sila. For the adaptive, they use a spoon, spilling little, not just little but madami po sila talaga natatapon. And they drinks from cup with one hand, unassisted, and they choose food, they unzips large zipper, they indicates toilet needs, and removes shoes, socks, pants, and sweater. For example po, kapag yung baby, yung kapatid ko na lang po pala, yung kapatid ko po kapag uupo siya, or papasok siya, kahit hindi naman bahay, alam niyo po talaga na, I have to remove my slippers. Ganun po, parang nasa mindset na ng bata or ng kapatid ko na, kailangan kong tanggalin to. Kasi papasok ako, ganun po. Then, they also remove pants or sweater. Kapag naiinitan sila, yung kapatid ko po hindi po siya pwede mag-sweater kasi pawisin po siya. They pants, shorts po kapag, syempre po, bata pa, naiihian nila yung mga shorts nila. So, marunong na po siya maghubad mag-isa. No shorts po. So, that would be all.
At the age between 2 to 3-year-old, cognitives are responds to simple directions, selects and looks at picture books, name pictured objects, and identifies several objects within one pictures. Stacked rings on peg in order of size. Recognize self in mirror saying baby or own name. Can talk briefly about what one is doing. Then language identifies body parts. Comes on conversations with self and dolls. Diba yung mga bata is pag naglalaro, kinakausap nila yung laruan nila na tinatawag nila ng another name. Social interaction. Place near other children. Watch other children. Joins briefly in their place. Defines own positions. So, dito sa social interactions, nai-improve na nung bata na makipagsabayan sa kapwa nila bata. Kumbaga, yung mga bagay na hindi nila magawa noong 1-year-old pa lamang sila is ngayon sa 2 to 3-year-old is nagagawa na nila na kumbaga na dadagdagan yung skills or kaalaman nila tungkol sa pakikipagsalamuha. And sa adaptive naman is uses spoon, little spilling, gets drink from fountain or faucet and independently. So dito kaya na nilang kumain ng di nahuhulog yung kutsara, di natatapon yung tubig, kaya na nilang kumuha ng sarili nilang pagkain at sarili nilang inumin.
The cognitive between 3 and 4 years old is they can recognize and matches 6 colors, intentionally stack blocks or rings in order of size, draw somewhat recognizable picture that is meaningful to child if not to adult, names and briefly explain picture, ask questions for information, why and how question, requiring simple answer, knows own age, name and last name, has short attention span, learn through observing and imitating adult, and
by adult instruction and explanation is very easy distracted. Has increased understanding of concept of the functions and groupings of objects and parts of our whole. The language between 4 to 5 years old can tell a story, has a sentence length of 4 to 5 words, has a vocabulary of nearly 1,000 words, names of least one color, understand yesterday, summer, lunchtime, tonight, and little big. Begins to obey requests like put the block under the chair. Knows his or her last name, name of street on which he or she lives, and several nursery rhymes. We have two types of motor coordination, the gross motor and the fine motor. The gross motor of 3 and 4 years old runs around, obtains, walk on a line, balance on one foot for 5 to 10 seconds, hops on one foot, pushes, pulls, stirs, build toys, ride tricycle, uses slide independently, jumps over 6-inch high object and lands on both feet together, throw ball overhead, catches a bounce ball. The fine motor of 3 and 4 years old builds tower of 9 small blocks, drives nail and pegs, copies circle, imitates cross, manipulates play material, rules, balls, snakes, or cookies. The social interaction of 3 and 4 years old is to join in play with other children, begins interaction, shares toys, takes turns and with assistance, begins dramatic play, acting out rule sense. The adaptive of 3 and 4 years old is pour well from small pitcher, spread soft butter with knife, buttons and unbuttons, large buttons, washes hand independently, blows nose when reminded, uses toilet independently. Between 4 and 5 years old, the cognitive is to place with words, create own rhyming words, says or makes up words having similar sounds, point and names 4 to 6 colors, matches picture of familiar object, draws a person with 2 to 6 recognizable parts such as head, arms, and legs, can name or match drawn part to own body, as well as through exploration, is easily distracted. Has increased understanding of concept of function, time, part or whole relationships, function or use of objects may be stated in addition to names of object. Time concept are expanding, can talk about yesterday or last week, about today, and about what will happen tomorrow. Sa edad na 4 at 5 taon ng mga bata, ay tinuturuan sila ng kanilang mga magulang na magsulat, magguhit, at magtukoy ng pangalan ng mga bagay. Gaya na lamang sa pagsulat ng kanilang pangalan, edad, at pagbilang, at sa pagguhit ng mga tao, mga bagay, at sa pagtukoy na din ng mga bagay, kagaya na lamang ng mga lapis, ballpen, papel, at iba pa. Halimbawa, and to language has sentence length of 4 to 5 words, uses past tense correctly, has vocabulary of nearly 1,500 words, point to color red, blue, yellow, and green, identifies triangle, circles, and squares, understand in the morning, next, and noontime, can speak of imaginary conditions such as I hope, ask many questions as who and why. Sa edad na 4 at 5 taon, ang mga bata ay kaya na nilang magsalita ng kanilang pangalan at kaya na din nilang umintindi ng nagtuturo sa kanila o nagpapayo. Halimbawa, we have two types of motor coordination, the gross motor and fine motor. The gross motor of 4 and 5 years old is walks backward 2 hill, jumps forward 10 times without falling, walks up and down stair independently, alternating feet, turns somersault. The fine motor is cuts on line continuously, copies cross, copies square, prints some capital letters. Sa edad na 4 at 5 taon, ang bata ay kaya nang makapaglakad at makatakbo o makapaglakad sa hagdan. Halimbawa, social interaction is to place and interacts with other children. Dramatic play is closer to reality with attention paid to detail, time, and space. Plays dress up shows interest in exploring sex differences. Ang mga bata ay natututunan din nilang makipaglaro sa ibang bata. Halimbawa, adaptive cuts easy foods with a knife, laces shoes. Dito naman, ang na-adapt ng mga bata ay ang mga salita ng kanilang mga kasama sa bahay, kagaya na lang sa pagsalita ng mga English language at nagagaya na rin ng mga bata ang mga ginagawa ng kanilang kapatid o magulang.
Between 5 to 6 years old, the cognitive retells story from picture book with reasonable accuracy, names some letters and numerals, root counts to tens, sort objects by single characteristics, is beginning to use accurately time concept of tomorrow and yesterday, uses classroom tools meaningfully and purposefully, begins to relate clock time to daily schedule, has increased understanding of concept of function, time, part, and whole relationship, function or use of objects but may be stated in addition to names of objects. At the age of 5 years old, they develop their oral language skills that compose 5 or more words. They have their own knowledge in counting, colors, and they can make more objects that they can see in surroundings. Between 5 to 6 years old, the language has a sentence length of 5 to 6 words, has a vocabulary of around 2,000 words, defines objects by their use, and can tell what objects are made of. Knows spatial relations like on top, behind, far, and near. Knows here address, knows common opposites like big or little. understand same and different, ask question for information, distinguish left and right hand in herself. In language, at that age, children start to understand that single words might have different meanings, and also they aware of many sounds that make up words, but it depends on children's development. Because in my observation, some other children can keep up to others because of some reasons. Motor coordination. Motor coordination has a two motor, the gross motor and the fine motor. Gross motor of between 5 to 6 years old, run lightly of toes, walk on balance, can cover 2 meters hooping, skips on alternate feet, jump rope, and skates. In fine motor naman is they cuts out simple shapes, copies triangle, trace diamond, prints numeral 1 to 5, and colors within lines, has adult grasp of pencils. Motor coordination, dito naman holding their own pencil with 3-finger grasps and generating movement from fingers. So, kinakailangan pa dito yung alalay ng kanilang magulang para sa kanilang achievement. Social interaction between 5 to 6 years old, they choose own friends, play simple table games, plays competitive games, engage in cooperative plays with other children involving group decisions, rule assignments, fair play. In social interaction naman, they always want them to play with other children and enjoy most of the time. But at a young age, children might be emotional, such as they learn and accept their peers, they cooperate and share with friends. The adaptive between 5 to 6 years old dresses self completely, bow ties, brushes teeth, independently cross streets safe. In adaptive naman, children at that age develop learning. They adapt in saying their own full name, age, birthday, and even they can draw more realistic pictures.
And now, we are already done in discussing the various meaning of the giftedness, the different characteristic and the profile of the learners. And now let's discuss the identifying gifted learners. So Martenson developed an easy-to-use screening tool for identifying gifted and talented learners. In an educational program, the instrument involves the teachers identifying the names of the children that first come to mind up and reading the items. In the screening tool, the following are the items or the full version of the instrument referred to Martenson, the identification of the gifted and talented. So, as you can see at the table, makikita mo dito yung mga characteristic ng learners and the name of the student. Ito yung ginamit ni Martenson para ma-identify yung mga gifted and talented learners. O dito sa name of student, ilalagay mo lang. For example, si Miss Rinalyn Cornelio, has usually good vocabulary. Yun yung characteristic niya. Magaling siya doon. Ibig sabihin, gifted siya and talented. So, the rest, yun yung example doon sa characteristic. So, that would be all. Thank you. Hope you learned something.